Hi, I'm here with Juliette Engel, the author of Sparky, Surviving Sex Magic and Angels Over Moscow, Life, Death, and Human Trafficking in Russia. Welcome, Juliette. It's so nice to see you.
It's nice to see you.
So I wonder if you could give us a brief introduction to your work.
Okay, I'm a physician. I'm 72 years old. I've been on this earth for quite a while. I grew up in a CIA cult, which was called MK Ultra, and was trained in their program called Sex Magic, which is about manipulating people. I was scheduled to become what they called at the time a vril girl, and that's sort of a sexy scientist type. You see them around, I know they're here. When I was 17, I escaped from the program and enrolled myself in the University of Washington through a series of well-planned moves and fortunate circumstances, and completely started my life again. So entirely forgot my life up until that point, and started over as a completely newly reinvented person. And when you understand how the MK Ultra cults work, a lot of what's done is splitting personalities and forgetting one from the other and one time from the other. And a lot of drugs are involved. So you wonder how can you completely forget your life, but you can. And wasn't until my daughter was born that and I had this little replica of myself in my hands that I realized I needed to know what had happened to me. How did my parents raise me? And where were those wonderful moments from childhood? What did I want to replicate? But what I got was just so awful, so terrible that I had a complete breakdown, although no one would ever know that. Looking at me, people I worked with didn't know that. But that's another part of the programs. You can really hide things. And I started on the process of piecing together the memories. And I did get it. It took years of work with a trusted psychiatrist who was very good, just pulling out the memories. But they had no emotion attached to them. So I had no feeling about any of it. It was just like it was a timeline. I worked out a timeline of my life, but it took much more and many more years and a lot of experiences to get that back. And in the meantime, I graduated from medical school. I was top of my class and started a practice in Seattle, Washington as a radiologist and specialist in ultrasound, and had my own consulting firm and research and development. And it was an exciting time to be in Seattle. This would be the late 70s and 80s when all the entrepreneurs were getting going, and I was one of them. And in 1990, I was invited to go to Russia as a medical consultant, and wound up staying, not being able to walk away from the situation there for mothers and children in maternity hospitals. And I got very involved in reforming maternal and infant health care for Russia, and did a lot in that field. And then eventually discovered that children were being abandoned from the birth houses and going into orphanages. And then from the orphanages, they were being taken to other countries, and they disappeared. So it was my discovery of the sex trafficking of children. And I got a lot of support from the American government through USIA and USAID and the TIP office and the Bureau of Economic and Cultural Affairs. And a lot of these groups were interested in sex trafficking in Russia. But what I discovered was a lot of the sex trafficking was actually going to the United States, and they did not want to hear that at all. So yeah. that led to my experience of being erased. And they would look at the materials, they would look at the numbers, and they wouldn't. No, I mean, I'd have them all there in a meeting, and I'd have the slides, and I'd have the materials, I had the posters everywhere, and they wouldn't look at it. And
So we got into some sensitive spots, and it became a something that they couldn't touch or talk about.
Yeah. I still have my suspicions about that, and people that I know were involved in sex trafficking in Russia, I've seen them here. So I don't know what I can do. I'm writing about my experiences. I'm telling my experiences. I feed it to my experiences, trying not to speculate. But then on top of that comes this overlay for me of my whole history of growing up in this program. Mm-hmm. And I think it gives me some skills maybe that I wouldn't have otherwise. And I don't know, you are who you are. So
yeah, and your books were so engaging and so very personal. And it seems that they represent the two halves kind of your life, where the one was remembered and the other was actually experienced in the first person. And so with that, like, could you tell us who Sparky is and what was the genesis of Sparky?
Well, Sparky was, as I was growing up, we were, I was put in this program probably earlier than 6, but I can identify a distinct event which led to my being in the program at the age of 6. And it involved a lot of abuse, a lot of sexual abuse, a lot of these programs came right out of the Nazi programs that were conducted in concentration camps, because their goal was, and they did these in Russia after the war too. So their goal was to take the scientists, not to waste millions of pages of experiment on thousands of poor victims in Germany, where they conducted these horrible psychological experiments. The idea was to create a completely compliant, soulless automaton of a brilliant soldier, basically, whether it be in combat or in sexual exploitation of other people. I think you've seen a few of those characters, and economic, academic, every sphere. They plan. If you read Hitler's Mein Kampf, which is the MK of MK Ultra, if you read the last third of Mein Kampf, he outlines this program of creating an elite core of individuals that are taken from elite families, and certainly mine was an elite family. And these people are raised to be the people that manifest all of the creating transhumanism, creating a race of part human, part gods, who then go and defeat God. And that was their overall plan. So, you look at that as a normal person, you think that's really nuts. And it was, but they thought it was great. And so these Nazi scientists were brought to the United States by the thousands, were given new names, new identities, and given lots of money and access to the children of what, the Americans considered their intelligence elite. So children of military, diplomatic corps people, top level intelligence. And that's who was in the program I was in. Now, there were a lot of other programs and a lot of other situations, but I could speak to that because that's what I was in.
So MK Ultra was like a continuation of the Nazi Übermensch program that was designed in the concentration camps during World War II, and maybe sometime previously to that, and then just continued as a program. And when the war was over, they brought over thousands of Nazi scientists in Operation Paperclip to just keep the program rolling. Is that
yes,
accurate?
Yeah. And they did it in Great Britain, and they did it in Russia. And I've met some of those people in Russia who were not treated as well as they were in America. And as you say, the whole construct is probably much, much older than the Nazis, and certainly it is. The whole idea of a race of godlike men like gods, who defeat God and rule the universe.
Yeah,
and that,
it's playing itself out kind of on the world stage right now, a little bit with the transhumanism
it really is
agenda. But kind of going back to you, like some of these people that you ran into, like Dr. Green and Dr. White and Chip, were you able to subsequently identify them as being part of the MK Ultra program, or as being in Operation Paperclip, or like did you just it's kind of long ago and you had forgotten that time, and maybe how much research have you done back into those programs?
The Dr. Greens, the Dr. Whites, Dr. Browns, they changed. So it was just a generic name. It was more like a rank than an actual name. So I was probably at 20 different annexes growing up, and each one of them had a Dr. Green, a Dr. White, a Dr. Brown, an Annie Black, and Chip was an interesting character because he was the Dr. Brown associated with, seems to be associated with Disneyland at that time. And, or at least to me it was, because he was always doing stuff with us at Disneyland. He was also the one who started training me in Psi, which is remote viewing. And because it's California and he had a ponytail and he was trying to be cool, he didn't like Dr. Brown, so he called himself Chip. And he became my handler for a long time. I don't know, it seemed like a long time. Yeah, that's probably 5 years.
That time of your life, it was a long time, probably.
Very long time.
So tell me more about Disneyland. What was going on there?
Well, my first, I didn't live far from Disneyland at that time. I was living in Imperial Beach, which is on the Mexican border. It's as close as you can get, and be in California. And I was 10 years old at that time. And that's when each place I lived, I had a different name in myself. I became a completely different persona, forgot who I'd been before. Although, in school, I was the same person going forward. But in my inner world, which was more real than my outer world to me, I had a different name. So when I was 10 years old, I became Sparky McGregor, and that was based on an old story. I guess I descend from McGregors, and I had found that out from my grandmother. So I took on that persona as like a warrior character. And it was really good because during that year, I developed a warrior persona, which stayed with me the rest of my life.
It was protective.
But the Disneyland,
protective.
Yeah, but not just defensive. As a little kid, you're so helpless. And at 10, because of all the abuse and everything, it makes you go through puberty early. So I was starting to go through puberty, and I knew how. And we were living in an apartment complex, which was actually all brothels, and our apartment was actually as close to the border with Tijuana as you could get. It was right on what's the Tijuana sewer. It's still the Tijuana sewer, although they call it the marshlands, and it's got a little park, but it still stinks. And, about a mile from the Mexican border. And I knew what went on. I knew what was going on. I knew what they were planning for me, and I wanted out.
Yes.
And, but I was also completely defenseless. And I knew that on my own, I couldn't survive 10 minutes. And I would be taken in and used in one of the brothels. And that was not in my plan. And
well, I loved how you had the stories of normal childhood life interspersed with these horrific abuse moments, and you're able to maintain a part of yourself and to protect yourself in ways by having this personality and this persona and leading other kids within the group in the persona, and it's really kind of a beautiful story of transcending the evil that was being foisted upon you on a daily basis. And it makes me wonder, like, how you persisted and made it through all that stuff, and the idea that you created this warrior persona to help you. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah, it's what they tried to do. They tried to get you to split into different personalities, so that one could be a murderer, one could be a genius, one could be learn different languages, and they didn't communicate with each other. And I still, honestly, I have that problem where I'll shift from one to the other and sort of lose track. Mm-hmm. So people are always telling me, like, you're 4 or 5 different people. And I go, well, sorry, but it's probably true. I've probably got it together as I can get it. But that was the only way to survive, was to completely dissociate. And I think that people, what that means is, like, your soul leaves your body.
Yes.
It's your spirit leaves your body, because your body is defenseless, helpless. You can't do anything to help your body in that circumstance. So you become a person of ether. You float above yourself. You're outside of yourself. Sometimes I would go for months like that, and it would be very hard to get back in, to start feeling connected to your body again.
Yeah. But
it worked. It was a terrific survival mechanism. So I lived my life outside of my body. And I think that was my best survival mechanism. But it made it very difficult in terms of remembering the details of what my body went through, because I was blocking it out completely. Yeah. So in Sparky, I really worked to get some of those. I got enough, I think, to tell people what it was like. I don't want to get into describing Black masses. I don't want to get into describing in detail the sacrifices or the cannibalism or what they said or the symbols or all that. Yeah, I've seen it. And I don't want to spread it, and nobody should have it. And so I try to put enough in there strictly from my own experiences and from my dissociated state to say what my experience was like. But the Disneyland thing was they took a bunch of us, gave us all new clothes, and took us to Disneyland, and dropped me off at Frontierland. They dropped the kids off all over Disneyland by themselves, or we thought we were by ourselves. And my objective was to find a daddy, get him to buy me some food, because they hadn't given me any food. So I was really, really hungry, and I wanted some food, and then get him to take me on the Wild Toad ride at Disneyland. And they told us there were cameras. There's a part where you come onto the rail line and a light comes at you, and it's like a train is coming right at you. I don't know if you've been on that, but
I have.
And the light was actually a camera, and so I was supposed to get the daddy to do something really inappropriate so he could be, get a picture. So I did that, and I did it to 2 guys. So being a hyperachiever, I got 2 hamburgers and 2 sets of pictures. And I felt very bad about it. But when we all went back to the bus, only half the kids got back on the bus, and the other half didn't get their pictures. And I don't know what happened to them. So I mean, they made it sound like they were just tossed in the fire or something.
And that must have been pretty distressing to understand that maybe your life was at risk if you didn't perform.
I got used to having my life at risk. And that, in a sense, helped me later when I was working against human trafficking in Russia, going into villages and actually talking to traffickers and confronting corrupt officials and this kind of thing.
So was
I wasn't as afraid as maybe I should have been.
So you had the courage, and maybe that was a good thing, and at some points maybe not. Was Disneyland like a regular operational place or just a training ground? Was that just a one-time event or?
For me, it was multiple times. Had us do different things. And whether Disneyland itself had anything to do with it, I don't know.
Yeah.
We weren't filled in. Certainly a lot of the kids that were in the Disney movies were involved in different parts of the program. I would name some, but they're alive, so I can't really do that. And so I've tried to keep it just on my experiences and not speculate. I don't know for sure. Yeah, I would look at it very hard from the outside as an investigator.
Yeah, we can leave the speculation to others, but just understanding that was like an operational area that MK Ultra worked in, having a brief understanding of that is really helpful. Then, and
this was 1958 and 1959, so it had only been open a few years. So it could be completely different now, for the better or for worse. I don't know.
Yeah, and like, did you have an idea of the scope or the breadth of the programs that were out there, of the MK Ultra program?
In that I was put through so many different ones. What would always happen is that after a while, I'd start getting the attention of people in school, like teachers and social workers. I always went to school exactly half the year, or one day more than half the year, because you had to be in school 91 days to get to the next grade. So I was in school for the absolute minimum. And my parents would always be telling the school board how sick I was and that I had a bad heart and all this stuff. So the schools would check me out, and I didn't have a bad heart. And they'd be visiting my house. And as soon as that started happening, we'd move. So we went from place to place to place, often from state to state. And so I'd be in different annexes in different places. So I know that the programs were very active in Washington State, in California, in Illinois, because those are the places I was. I did some things in Washington, D.C. So that I can say. And then that was the 1950s. I think it's only expanded since then. And certainly in 1976, when Senator Frank Church had his hearings, and in the congressional record, if you look up the Church Commission findings, they found that 85 different hospitals and universities had participated, had gotten funding from the CIA to do specifically the MK Ultra programs. And there were 145 or 150 different private contractors that had contracted to do the programs. Those also included academic institutions and defense contractors. And so in 1976, there was evidence of programs all over the country. And if you add up how many people were in each program, and each one involved unknowing subjects, involuntary subjects, each one was in violation of the Nuremberg Code, which states that you can't experiment on Americans without their consent. And certainly children aren't legally able to give their consent.
Yes.
So there were thousands of children in these programs. That's why the Nuremberg Code means nothing to these people now. And the government and the pharmaceutical companies are completely, they don't see any reason to respect the Nuremberg Code at all. We're thinking, oh, that's our protection. They've been violating it. It came into effect in 1947. They've been in total violation of it since 1953. So that's why it doesn't matter to them. Plus, a lot of them themselves were probably in the very same program I was in, except they didn't leave it. They took the financial rewards, gave up their souls, in this dialogue they're speaking, and they're not going to change.
No,
they can't get out of it.
We see how much.
So we're stuck with this.
Consent. means now, right?
Yeah, informed consent, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting that Operation Paperclip with the Nazi scientists coming to the U.S., Britain, and Russia, but also there was IG Farben and all the financial interests and all the patents and the international chemical cartels, which became some of our existing pharmaceutical companies and chemical companies.
Yes.
And there's an interesting book called Martin Bormann, Nazi in Exile, where they showed how Hitler's finance minister, Martin Bormann, hid all of the assets because they knew they were going to lose the war. So globally, they just hid all the assets in these subsidiaries. And they were aided and abetted by the Dulles brothers and the Swiss and United States attorneys who subsequently made it into the State Department in the United States. So the fact that you were having trouble with the State Department and trafficking, that makes all the sense in the world.
Yeah. Because it seems like, so this was happening to me in like the year 2000. It had really only been 50 years. To me, that seemed like a long time. But in the scale of how long these things have been going on, that's nothing. It's all part of the continuum.
Well, it seems like it's generational. And you mentioned in the book that, and some of the horrific scenes that you're briefly recalling and only giving us enough of a dose so that we weren't terrorized by it, which was nice, that we don't have the full picture, but that there were military people involved. And they kind of implied that you were generationally involved and that your grandfather was an elite somewhere in the Templars or something. And I don't know if you can speak to that or if you have any sense of these elite military people who were co-opted into the music business and to the MK Ultra program, and they ended up killing themselves at 27 years old. And what is all that about?
Well, there's a lot of things going on. It's multi-generational. I did spend almost a year doing my ancestry and can trace this all the way back a very long way, and can see the connections. And I'm a girl, so I wasn't considered terribly important. And I think when I look at the history of my family in the last 100 years, it's been a disaster for the firstborn girls in every family. They either die, disappear. A number of them are raised by people who aren't their parents, and they don't know why. I mean, so they're given away. So kids are exchanged between families whose only connection is that they're, elite. And so I think it's to break that maternal-paternal bond, which they did with me through trauma. I didn't trust my parents at all after the age of 5 or 6. But I have met my cousins whose mothers were obviously in the same situation I was in. I'm the only one that's still alive. And of course, they want to know something about it. So that's one of the reasons I wrote Sparky, sort of to all my cousins. I'm talking 4 or 5 cousins who obviously were in the same boat I was in, who are all dead now, but their children are wondering, and their brothers and sisters who had this person in their family disappear are wondering what that was about. Of course, the truth is more horrible probably than anything they could imagine. But yeah, I'm now in close contact with several of my cousins who are the children of the cousins who are in the same spot I was in. So yeah, this was going on. And it seemed like they gave up the first girls and then the boys got the advantages.
It's kind of heartbreaking to hear you talk about it. And I think it's amazing that you were able to survive that and then to break the cycle for yourself. And maybe you could talk a little bit about how you escaped.
Well, I was going to say one thing. Through all of this, I don't know if I talked about this at the conference, at the expo, but someone, and I think it was my father's mother, who I didn't hardly know, but she taught me the Lord's Prayer. And somehow that gave me a sense of being connected secretly, because it was all I had to do this in secret. So I would say a version of the Lord's Prayer as best as I could do it every night and feel the connection to God. And I would say my cousins that survived, these are the second generation, but they've still been through this, have all got that kind of spiritual connections, and the ones that didn't survive. So alcoholism was rampant. 4 of my cousins that I know of committed suicide before the age of 40. So yeah, it's just I don't see the point in any of this, but
yeah,
I do have a sense of the curse that's sort of been put on our generations rolling forward from these crazy ideas from powerful people. And the only reason they have power at all is because of the debt money system. Mm-hmm. As you said, they hid their assets, but also we're stuck with this Babylonian debt money system. So we're all in debt. So why are we in debt? Why are we in debt to these people? What do we owe them?
Yeah.
Nothing.
Make any sense. No.
What's the national debt? The national debt is money owed to the Federal Reserve Bank. What's the Federal Reserve Bank? It's some fake printing press that prints money and then lets our treasury borrow it. Why doesn't our treasury print money?
No, they make it up.
Yeah, they're just making it up. So we're all caught in this, what's it called? The mass psychosis or mass psychotic formation that they're trying to block from Google on the internet, so people aren't talking about that.
Right.
So the whole nation has to be nuts to accept this.
So just going back,
but it is.
No, they are, and among many other things that the whole nation is accepting. But just going back to the things that you were able to connect to and hold on to, it sounded like the Lord's Prayer. So you had a connection to spiritually to God, and then that I got the impression during reading the book that getting the book from your grandmother, was it the Scottish stories?
Yeah.
Was a connection to your past, and you were able to create a past for yourself and a future for yourself with those stories. And maybe there was some connection to your grandmother. Maybe there was something there that helped you understand that you weren't alone at all times, and the connection to God. And then just that stark contrast between maybe your regular world and this world of satanic evil deception and breaking of people. The contrast must have been like so vast that maybe it was easier to hold on to the good part of it.
Yeah, you either learn to put up these tremendous thick walls, invisible walls, or you didn't survive.
Yeah.
And the book came from my other grandmother, my mother's mother, and she had the book, The Miracle Sword of Clan Breyer, which was just this old. There are a lot of publishers in my family, and I think it was what they call a vanity book, where somebody wrote some stories and did some illustrations and published it in the 1800s, and that she had a piece of it. So I went through her hat box of pictures, looking for a picture, and of course there weren't any, but there was this book, and so I stole it.
Wonderful.
She never noticed. I thought I'd done this terrible thing, and it was like I told her years later, and she goes, "What? What'd you take?
Which book?"
Yeah, what book? So anyway, so it helped me to create a persona, and that was the Sparky McGregor character.
Yeah.
So I could inflate the McGregors into noble warriors and make that the goal for myself, because I wasn't going to survive if I wasn't a warrior. I wasn't going to make it.
Well, there were some pretty nasty characters that you were involved in your life, including people that were closest to you. You know, the one character that kind of got me was Vito, and because I'd heard stories about Vito and the Freaks, and I'd seen some interviews in the past, and I know that's a tough subject for you, but maybe you could tell us a little bit about it.
Well, yeah, when I was in high school, on the weekends and in summer vacation, and they would just take me out of school, and they would put on parties in Laurel Canyon, but there were a lot of canyons. There was Tabruca Canyon, there was Topanga Canyon, El Toro Canyon, lots of canyons, and they'd have parties up in these canyons, and it was the music business. So it was MK Ultra in the music business. So when Mamas and the Papas sing that song, "Young Girls Are Coming to the Canyon," yeah, we'd come on buses and walk with our homework and go stay in, garages and things like that. And then we'd be picked up by Vito and Bernie and Frank and given these crazy costumes to wear. And you asked me if I recognized myself in one of the films, but I was never wearing my own clothes, so it's a little hard to say. Sometimes you'd be dressed up by something, but the one thing is you always had a skirt, an unskirt, or hot pants or something like that. Mm-hmm. And so basically, then he would pass out drugs in the back of this truck he had, and it was like an army transport truck or something, but it was painted pink, had flowers all over it, and it was like he would drive us to parties, and our job, there'd be a bunch of record executives, kind of bored and sitting out on the grass and listening to music, which often wasn't very good, the music that they were hyping in the early stages of it just wasn't great. But our job was to liven up the party, get everybody, hand out little blotters of LSD. I don't know. You're probably not old enough to have seen the blotters of LSD that used to get passed around the college. But, it was like little bright spots on filter paper, blotter paper. That's how it's served.
I remember that
one in your mouth.
That candy was that little candy that was like drops on paper, and you should just pick them off.
Yeah, it was drops.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like
but
that.
you put the whole piece in your mouth and you suck it off of there. I'm sure most people swallowed it. I don't know. I didn't like it. So then you'd get the record execs all hyped up, and then the music would get really loud and crazy, and we'd be dancing like crazy. And really all I had to do was dance. And then they'd sell a lot of content. They would get people naked and get people compromised and take a lot of pictures. And that was the whole basis for blackmail. And I don't know why anybody was stupid enough to come to these things, but
so that's just how they did business.
It's how they did business, and we were slave labor, and they used us.
I'm sure you didn't know.
Yeah, and then they would use us in ceremonies, and this was what Vito did, and some of the very compromised record executives.
Yeah.
And the one that's in prison right now. But yeah, that was standard operating practice, and just didn't cost them much. So all they had to do was stuff us into a garage for a weekend.
Well, it reminds me of the Operation Midnight Climax, right, where they had the prostitutes and the LSD, and the CIA would just bring people in and then film them, and they'd have the blackmail material.
That's what it was.
Yeah,
there it is.
Yeah,
that's what it was. But it was. I'm thinking about the film that you sent me, where the people are all sitting out on the grass.
Yeah,
must be. It was usually that way, they'd be at somebody's house. It would be a swimming pool that would be like turned into a stage, and then everybody would be on the ground already, and it made it easier to like get them undressed and get them compromised, and
so it must have been, you probably didn't know the people, but you must have run across some amazing characters at that point in time. No,
yeah.
I'm just wondering if, I mean, all these record executives and the music people, and I'm wondering, I was just thinking that maybe you had run across Manson or Sharon Tate or people like that in your.
Yeah. Well, Charlie, yeah, Chuck Manson. Yeah. He was like the AV guy for the music. And wherever there was music, he would be setting up the stuff and setting up the speakers. Then he would fill in. He was a decent musician, not a great musician, so he could play drums or guitar. And so he was there. He was very undynamic. This was long before they were involved in murder and mayhem, which I think was in the 70s. So we're talking probably 6 years before that. But yeah, he was always around, and dull as dishwater. Boring person.
Do you think he was in the program?
Another person? I don't know. Yeah. Probably. Yeah, I think he came from military family too. Thinking that the ones I saw the most of, I saw a lot of John Phillips and Denny. The guy he was singing with. This was back when they were the Journeymen. Okay. And then when they were just starting the Mamas and the Papas. It's not like he interacted with me, but I knew, I saw him. John Sebastian, saw him.
Yeah. So, that's interesting, and maybe interesting to some people, like the people that you ran across, and it doesn't really get to the point of it was a slave labor operation and you were actually a high school kid and they were taking you out of school. They were taking you away from your home. You would show up the next day at school bleary eyed and, trying to get through high school and be a kid. And I don't know what ages they had you doing this stuff. It sounded like, from 10 to 17.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it sounded like the Christmas was just a horrible time for you, or bad
Christmas,
things happened.
That's something that I did go into detail, or more detail, in Sparky, because the symbolism we're seeing now on Netflix and on just everywhere you look, it's all has nothing to do with the birth of Christ. It's nothing to do with Christianity. It's all about the Saturnalia. And the Saturnalia is the pagan worship of Saturn. And it's a time of human sacrifice, of child sacrifice, of cannibalism, of drinking blood, and all this holly, the fir trees, I can't stand the smell of pine and cinnamon together ever.
Yeah.
Because that's what they use. And they would take me to those things, and I would be sexually abused, for days. But other girls would be sacrificed, and their hearts would be cut out, and they'd smear blood on my head. And it was, at that point, I was so out of my body that I have no memory of what that felt like, except the story, the way I wrote it in Sparky, is how I lived it so that I survived it. And I always wondered, why didn't it kill me? And I think the answer's in my own bloodline and my family history and all that. So I had a purpose for them. They had a use for me.
Well,
And it's not what I'm doing now.
No. I mean, it's just so horrific. It's hard for people to wrap their heads around. And I think the
which
only
is
way...
why they're getting away with it.
That's right.
Because normal people think, oh, pine trees, nice.
Well, it's
how cute. Everybody's wearing a pixie hat and dressing like elves. And children are being brought by the plane load over the border right now. They're being brought in probably for Saturnalias. They're going on right now. And unprotected children are defenseless. And bringing them in by the plane, government-sponsored planes, bringing children in the midst of this Saturnalia season is just, I don't know, sometimes I think I can't stand this planet anymore. But really, you stand and you fight it. It's been going on, as you say, was going on in Nineveh, was going on in the Saturnalia's ancient rites. And what stopped it was Christianity, the rise of Christianity. Nothing else is going to stop it.
No. And I try to wrap my hands around like how to communicate to people the things that are going on. And one of the only ways is through that connection of the things that went on in the concentration camps and that, all that was actually funded by global bankers, and they wanted their scientists back, and they brought them all back. And the same things that were occurring there were funded and are occurring here, then and now. And trying to connect those dots is very difficult for people psychologically, but trying to find a path back to it.
Yeah, because it doesn't make sense. How does killing children make sense? How does destroying your world make sense? How does turning human beings into machines so that we can go fight God make sense? It doesn't.
No.
It's stupid, and we're stuck with it because stupid people had a lot of money and stupid ideas.
Well, it goes back to like the Tower of Babel, right? People thought that they could build a tower to God, right? And God dispersed them. Mm. People think that now they can build a global technocratic dictatorship, and I think that they will be dispersed too. Maybe not without some really bad events or happenings, but if you kind of have to have that warrior spirit at this point in time.
Yes, we do. And I don't know what else to do except to speak out about it. And I've been reading a lot about the English Civil War, which is another time when people went into a mass formation psychosis and ended up slaughtering each other for absolutely no reason whatsoever, destroyed their entire country, destroyed their churches, destroyed their institutions. But in that case, a lot of them left for America. We're stuck. We're here. We fight this out. We get through this. We stop this mass psychosis.
Yep.
That's being pushed on us. It's an artificial construct. It's being pushed on us, and we have to fight for what we know. I going back to I was speaking at the Red Pill Expo and looking out at the sea of faces. And that room was so full of wonderful souls. You look at Netflix, you look at what they produce, there's no soul. I mean, it's just devoid of humanity. But that room was just full of these sweet, wonderful souls. And that's how we defeat this. The human soul is a powerful, powerful thing, which is why they're trying to take it away from us. That's why they do everything they can to get your soul, and they can't get it unless you give it up. So I think they're trying with this, looking for the God particle with the Hadron Collider, which is going to be revved up again in a few months. Better look out for that. Also the transhumanism and putting the robotics inside of our bodies with the vaccines. All of that is trying to capture the human soul. They're not going to be successful. But there's the fighting point. And that's where maybe my experience is of value to other people, because I fought for my life by keeping my soul. And I did. I kept it intact. Everybody has to do that, because it's the human soul that will defeat this evil. And probably 30% of people never will have the slightest idea of what's happened or what's going on. And maybe that doesn't matter.
I think that, not everyone can be saved. It's and then focusing on the people who have an open door or a crack in their heart for this type of information, and not trying to convince everybody and argue with everybody, right? We just do what we do. We put it out there. And if it resonates and it makes sense and the people connect to it, then they can take it to the next step and the next level for themselves. But you can't like tell anybody anything. You can't force them to think anything. You can't change people's minds. They only change their own minds. And if enough factual information or spiritual information comes their way, then maybe they can understand and get a grip on what's going on. And I think it's a battle between good and evil, clearly. It's very difficult. So something to be aware of and engage in. And it's almost like, I guess you were kind of made for this time. And
it works out that way, doesn't it?
Yeah.
God says, you will do this.
That's right.
Like telling Jonah, you will go to Nineveh and you will confront them.
That's
and
right.
He's trying so hard to go anywhere. Doesn't matter.
I'm watching Netflix. Leave me alone.
Yeah, right. I just want to zone out and watch something about Lucifer. No, you're going to Nineveh.
That's right. Another crime series.
That's right. Exactly.
So
just what we need.
I really appreciate getting to talk with you and having you spend the time with me and getting this information out there. And I think there's a few more hours of discussion around your experiences in Moscow that maybe we could do that some other time. But
that's fine with me. No, that's fine. I'm perfectly happy to meet with you again.
And then I just want to ask you like one more question before we go. And that is from a trafficking perspective for parents, educators, teenagers or kids, what are some of the red flags that you should look for, be aware of, and like the major ones, and then we can go into detail some other time. But we've had people like approached at malls in my neighborhood, and bad things happen. So, we don't like to think that there's evil in the world, but I always told my daughter, right, you fight right where you are, right? You don't go to a secondary location. You
mean that don't go off with anybody? Or
that's right. Yeah. If you don't get in the car with anybody, you don't go off to another place.
No.
You don't, like, if that happens, you fight right there, not when you get to some other place. But anyway, that was my simple explanation.
I think a huge risk right now is the grooming, that kids are getting groomed on the internet and through Instagram and TikTok and all these things that people my age don't. I wouldn't be caught dead on TikTok. I wouldn't even know how to do it. But but the kids are on it all the time, and they're getting groomed. They're getting, kids are susceptible to the flash. So I think kids in orphanages, like I worked with in Russia, they are so vulnerable, and they require a whole set of structuring. But kids who have families, their parents need to give them the same kind of connection to God and spirit that my grandmother gave to me. That'll save them. If they have confidence in their own souls and their own connection to godliness and their own, the love of their parents. What a powerful thing. What a gift that is.
Yes.
So good parents are the best thing you can have. I mean, to prevent that and keep the kids from being groomed on the internet, and really watch what they're doing. And I'm so glad to see people stepping up and taking over school boards and taking back education, because that should be a super safe place to be, a school, and I know from back when I was a kid, they were trying to infiltrate the schools. And then there was another big push in the 80s to take over the schools. And somehow they slipped in there and did it. But we can take it back.
Yep.
So
yep. First, understand what's going on, and then we could take some action.
Take some action, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just keep loving your kids and letting them know how much you love them, and disciplining, being disciplined and watching out for that grooming influence, because the grooming is insidious.
Yes.
Look what those CNN producers were doing. They were grooming girls. Look what Ghislaine Maxwell did, convincing the girls that this was cool and it's wonderful, and she'd get them new clothes. And, it sounds great when you're a neglected kid. And
what a sad
the
situation
grooming is
that they have the flight logs. They know everybody who traveled, a lot of big names, and they were all protected by the court. And I
don't think they will be. I think
it's going to come out.
Yeah, I think the trafficking impetus was put into action, and that's part of the PEDS, the PEADS, the orders that Trump put in place. But I'm a firm believer in devolution. I think we're in devolution right now, and that's why things like the trafficking cases and the raids and the arrests and all that are going on. Indictments are being opened. Durham's operating. So a lot of things are happening that are really good. And we as human beings with souls have to hold the soul line, say right, wrong, good, evil. No, you're not going to hurt children. No, it's not going to happen. It's over. It's done. And the government has to be called out. I mean, what, a plane of 300 children just flew into Scranton, Pennsylvania. They don't know who they are. They just arrived. Who's taking them? What's happening to them? Nothing good.
Maybe they're going to Penn State. I don't know.
Oh God,
something like that. Very bad.
Just upsets me terribly. But you gotta keep holding the line. We're the line.
Yeah, like how do you stay optimistic in the face of all this news, right?
Well, I don't know, optimistic, but you set a goal, and the goal is the optimistic part. Mm-hmm. And you die on that line if you have to.
Yeah. So staying positive, and maybe it's that connection and having some faith and.
Yeah. Praise the Lord and pass the ammunition.
Well, Juliette,
I don't see anywhere in the Bible where God tells you to be a passive. No, he says, pick up the spear and fight for the Lord,
Yeah. Well, this has been fantastic, Juliette. I so appreciate I mean, I think that's a great line to leave on. Praise the Lord and pass the ammunition.
That's our job.
So much. Yeah, that's right.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Okay.